Okay, everybody, welcome back to our Kansas State podcast. As usual, yours truly, Kellis Robinett is here, and I'm once again joined by Blair Kerkhoff, who had a great weekend from what I can tell. Not only did he get to come over and listen to Phil Jackson talk some hoops at the Tex Winter Celebration of Life, but he got to see the Kansas City Chiefs. And you know what? In years past, I wasn't so jealous that you got to cover the Chiefs, but I'm getting that way. They are a lot of fun to watch.
They were amazing on Sunday night against the Bengals. I tell you what, it's not what NBC had in mind when they flexed the game to Sunday night. That was originally going to be a noon kickoff, and it was the 49ers and the Rams that was going to be the night game. That one got moved to the afternoon. Chiefs got moved tonight, and I think NBC wanted a competitive game, and they did not get it. It was the Chiefs' offense rolled like it's been rolling all season, but the big story was just how well their defense played. If their defense played like this, then you hate to get fans' hopes up really high, but I don't know what the potential may be unlimited for this Chiefs team.
Right. Well, a friend of mine a few weeks ago made a bet on the radio that he thought the Chiefs would get to the Super Bowl. And he was getting in on the basement on that, getting a lot of people to join in and say he was crazy. But I'm starting to think he might have had the good side of the bet on that one.
Well, and especially if they can get, they keep this record and end up playing playoff games at home, because this was one of those games on Sunday night where you saw where the crowd really had an impact on the game, that Andy Dalton couldn't audible, and you had Bengals players jumping offside. It was just it was one of those games where Arrowhead Stadium made a difference, and it hasn't made much of a difference in the playoffs the last few years, but this is a different team, different quarterback, kind of a different vibe around this Chiefs team.
Yeah, well, okay, enough Chiefs, as interesting as they are. Tell me about the Tex Winter ceremony. You covered this one while I couldn't make it. I've spent a lot, much of the last week writing about Tex, so I was a little disappointed I couldn't be there and listen to Phil Jackson talk. But it sounded like a pretty good celebration, cool celebration. What was it like to hear Phil talk about the great K-State legend?
Well, the whole thing was really well done. I mean, kudos to who those who organized it, put it all together, and arranged the speakers and the music. It was very nice. Someone commented to me afterwards that wouldn't it have been cooler to have that in Ahern instead of Bramlage.
Oh, yeah.
Because I guess Jack Hartman's tribute was in Ahern, and part of me says yes, but the other part says for just logistics, parking and whatnot, Bramlage was an ideal site, and it was. Like I said, the setup, it was all really well done. And Phil Jackson was the fifth of five speakers, that day. And by the time we got to Phil, pretty much the tears had been wiped away. There were some family members who would, with some very moving tributes to Tex Winter. But by the time Phil Jackson spoke, it was more, anecdotal and just the craziness of Tex Winter. Some of the stories that he told about Tex as assistant coach who loved his meals, who loved his garage sales, and so it ended on a really high note. It was neat to see Phil Jackson there, the most successful NBA coach of all time, sitting there in the middle of Bramlage Coliseum paying tribute to what I think, and this is something you and I chatted about, I think is the most significant figure in Kansas State basketball history.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's the only man associated with all four of Kansas State's Final Four appearances. He won a boatload of championships and then backed it up with NBA success. One thing I've noticed a lot lately from people among the Kansas State fan base is people saying, you know what, maybe he's been a little bit under-recognized around here. The road leading up to the practice facility is named Tex Winter Drive. But I've seen some people lately argue that maybe the court should be named after him, or his name should be somewhere up there on the rafters or something like that. What do you think about that? Do you think that's wild to rename the court after him?
I do not. I think that would be a fitting tribute to Tex. He was you mentioned the championships. He won 8 Big 8 championships in 15 seasons at Kansas State. That's a remarkable success rate. You mentioned the Final Fours. He came as an assistant right after World War II, along with when Jack Gardner was the head coach, and then Tex went off to become the head coach at Marquette for a couple of years. And when Jack left, Tex was what I would think of as an easy choice to become Kansas State's head coach. And it was the greatest period in Kansas State basketball history. I mean, it simply was the 50s into the 60s, not only the Big 8 championships, but the Bob Boozer and Jack Parr eras, Willie Murrell taking the team to the 64 Final Four, which was won by K-State lost to John Wooden, who won his first NCAA title that year in KC. So he is. It would have been neat. History is always a fickle thing. It would have been neat if he was able to stay, if he had stayed at Kansas State a little bit longer. 15 years is just. I can see if someone were to argue that they'll save the naming of a court for someone who has been at Kansas State longer, or maybe wins a national championship or something like that. But I think in this moment in time, to go over, to review 100 years or whatever, a century plus of Kansas State basketball, there has just been no more historically significant figure than Tex, and I would be in favor of the K-State Wildcats playing on Tex Winter court.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat, and I think it's a pretty good idea, just because the court is unnamed, the arena is named after a booster, and as successful as Kansas State has been historically basketball-wise, that would be an interesting way to honor him. I will say they are planning to honor him with a special patch this season.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they found a special, a unique Wildcat logo that they wore during the Tex Winter era, and they're gonna bring that back and stick it somewhere on the uniform. I guess they looked into maybe doing a triangle tribute thing, but they went this way. So they will honor him some way. But yeah, Tex Winter court would be pretty neat.
Yeah, he's in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame. Well, that came too late. I mean, that wasn't until 2011. He should have been in the Basketball Hall of Fame long before then. He's in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He's just the number of rings, 11 NBA title rings. I don't care if you're the head coach, the assistant coach. That's just an amazing accomplishment. And as you pointed out, when you wrote the original story about his death, there were luminaries from all over the basketball landscape were paying tribute to Tex Winter, including Kobe Bryant. And, Phil Jackson was telling Michael Jordan Tex Winter stories. And he had a front row seat, and even if you can even be closer to the court than a front row seat to some of the greatest basketball that's ever been played with those Bulls and Lakers, and not to mention his K-State success. So he's a person I think deserving of any tribute that could be made to him.
Well, the last thing I'll say on it is when Jacob Pullen, when he was here a week or two ago, had a funny story about it. Somebody asked him about Tex Winter, and he said that when he first got to Kansas State, he didn't really know all that much of him. And he said he asked Frank Martin something about, what's Tex Winter's significance here or whatever. And he said Frank Martin gave him like this weird look and said, you can't play for me until you can come back and, not only tell me who Tex Winter is, but truly appreciate all he did for the game. And, he said that took him by surprise, and he immediately went out and read his book on the triangle offense and stuff, and just felt really stupid that he was naive enough to not realize who he was.
No, that's a great story.
And truly learned to appreciate him. But, so it's a great guy. It's pretty neat that the basketball world has honored him the way they have.
Hey, it's Blair Kerkhoff, and if you're listening to this, you love Kansas City sports, whether it's the Chiefs, Royals, Sporting, Mizzou, KU, or K-State. And no one covers these teams like the Kansas City Star. If you currently subscribe to the paper or have a digital subscription, thank you for your support. And if you don't, here's a great offer. It's called Sports Pass. unlimited digital access to every sports story and video on kansascity.com. And it's just $30 for the first year. It's the best sports value in town. Just 8 cents a day or $2.50 a month. You can't beat that. Subscribe now at kansascity.com/sportspass.
There's football to be played this week. Switch gears a little bit. Kansas State at Oklahoma. The Wildcats are 23.5-point underdogs now in this game. That is a huge, huge line. I can't recall seeing a bigger one since I've been covering the Cats. So clearly, no one's expecting him to win this game. It was interesting today at the press conference. I asked Bill Snyder what I thought kind of was just a generic question about what he thought about Army when they played Oklahoma and gave them a lot of fits and almost actually won the game by just pounding the ball and keeping the ball away from Oklahoma. And he just lit up talking about how great it would be if K-State could do the same thing. But I don't know if they're going to go in there and just run it as much as they can or what, but they might have to get creative in ways to win this. What do you think? Do you think they got any shot here? Can they get creative enough to pull an upset?
Well, I'll tell you what, that was a really smart question and good observation because, obviously Oklahoma's not going to see in Kansas State or any other opponent the type of the triple option offense that Army runs. But what Army did in that game, which nobody saw because it wasn't televised, so you had to watch highlights or follow it online. But what Army did was they controlled the clock and ended up with, I believe, more than 40 minutes of possession time and doubled the number of plays, ran like 80 plays to somewhere in the 40s for Oklahoma and gave the Sooners all it wanted. Had to win. Oklahoma had needed overtime to win that game against an Army team that the program's improved over the last few years, but should have no business being able to stay on the field with Oklahoma. But they did it just by doing the things that we've associated Bill Snyder teams with over the years, and that is, being able to bleed the clock and run the ball successfully and not make mistakes, not turn it over. And some of the very best Kansas State teams have done that. Now, they led with the quarterback running, and that's less part of what they're about now, but still it's still in the repertoire for Kansas State, and that is I think that's the pathway for success is to keep this incredible Oklahoma offense and Kyler Murray off the field as much as possible, and try to bleed clock and go on 5, 6, 7 minute possessions and end them with touchdowns and not field goals. That's something else Army did. They were able to get the ball into the end zone, and sometimes that meant fourth down opportunities. Having to trying to keep the drive alive by converting fourth and 1, 4th and 2, and I think to win a game like this, you almost have to take a few risks like that, and own possession time, own total plays, don't turn it over, and end drives with touchdowns instead of field goals. And I think that's the way to have a chance to beat this team that's now kind of crawling its way back into college football playoff conversation.
Yeah. What do you think of Oklahoma? Do you think they're still the Big 12 best? Do you think Texas has passed them? Do you think they're in a trio with West Virginia? Where do you think they're at right now?
Yeah, I don't think it's as good as last year's team because I just think Baker Mayfield is as good as Murray is. I just think Baker Mayfield's was kind of a generational type talent, and we're seeing what he's doing with the Browns. So, there's enough turmoil on this Sooners team that they've changed. They're 2 games into their second defensive coordinator, Ruffin McNeil. So after firing Bob Stoops in the off weeks, so it's not it doesn't seem like it's they haven't done the things that you'd expect a championship level team to do this year. And I think going into the season, we saw Oklahoma as the favorite to win the Big 12, but not a prohibitive favorite. and this would be a little bit of a transition year without Baker Mayfield. So I still think I'm not sure that they're the best team in the Big 12. They've already lost one league game, and unlike last year when it was Iowa State pulling the upset in Norman, you still had that seemed fluky at the time. And even though Iowa State has gone on to do really nice things under Matt Campbell, you didn't feel like if they had played 10 times it'd be a 5-5 split. This year Texas played them pretty well in beating them, and if someone wanted to argue with me that Texas is the better team, I would go along with that. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. Oklahoma can't afford to lose again if it wants to, keep alive in the championship run. They've already lost the tiebreaker to Texas, so they have to be better than Texas to finish first. And I think what we're looking at though is these two teams, Texas and OU, playing for the Big 12 title at the end of the year in Cowboy Stadium. But I don't. I'm curious wondering how Oklahoma sees this game and sees K-State as an opponent, because at 3-4, Kansas State doesn't have a whole lot to hang its hat on except for one really, really good half of football last 2 weeks ago, right, against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, that's a harsh and realistic way to look at things. But to their credit, Kansas State did get a lot figured out that game. I personally don't love their chances here. I know Army gave them fits, but the yardage they got was just so methodical. I mean, they ran for like 350 yards on 78 carries. I mean, it was just like 4 yards. I was reading Oklahoma had a guy who had 28 tackles in the game. That is crazy to me. Alex Barnes, if he's on, that's not his game. He's got, we've seen the last few weeks, he's got some breakaway capabilities. They'll try to beat Oklahoma on the ground, obviously, but I don't think they can do it in exactly that way. If they're going to win or even challenge, I think, honestly, Skylar Thompson has to have a good game. Not that he has to throw for 250 yards or something, but he has to have a good completion percentage. He has to keep Oklahoma's defense honest, and that's something that the Wildcats couldn't do, say, when they played Texas early on. Texas knew the run was coming and totally took it away from them. I don't love Kansas State's chances here, but the good news for them is, if they can go into this week, do some good things and stay healthy, that game right afterwards, TCU, with all the turmoil they're having, that's all of a sudden looking winnable. Then you get Kansas after that. If you can make it through this week and then win those two, all of a sudden you're looking and feeling pretty good about a bowl game again.
Well, then you're 5-5, right? If you lose this week, win the next two, you're 5-5 with two chances to get to bowl eligibility. And at this point for Kansas State, that's what I'm looking at. And it may be a little less than what I thought in the preseason this team was capable of, but I think a lot of opinions changed after. For me, it started with the Mississippi State game and just how they got beat up on that afternoon. So I'm with you. I don't have confidence in Kansas State this weekend at OU. 23 does seem like a really large number. I can see the Wildcats having some success on offense and being able to keep the scoring down a little bit, and but can Alex Barnes in this offense score enough to keep up? I don't know. My question to you is it fixed? Are you convinced? Is it fixed for the Wildcats on both sides of the ball? Do they have they made the right adjustments? Made the right calls to feel good about the way things set up in the last 5 games?
Well, I think they've at least found their identity on both sides of the ball. They've finally figured out how to run the ball effectively, which is what we thought they'd do all season.
Right.
And on defense, they've figured out a way to blitz and do all these certain things without giving up big plays. And they really did look great against Oklahoma State. But obviously, that's just, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma aren't on the same level. I wasn't honestly all that impressed with Oklahoma State. I thought they looked bad, quite frankly. So to now go on the road and play Oklahoma, the level of difficulty is raised significantly. So like I said, if they can just show some signs of progress this week and keep that going as the season continues, I think that's probably what they're looking for here more than actually pulling out a win. But now stranger things have happened. I guess we'll see.
All right. So my other question to you is, I'm reading that Alex Delton is close to returning. What's the plan for him going forward?
Boy, I don't know. I think most Kansas State fans at this point would, as long as Skylar Thompson is healthy, just, ride him and not even have Alex Delton in the picture, because that's where the offense has looked at its best lately with Thompson leading the way. If he comes back this week or thereafter, I don't know what Bill Snyder's plan is. Does he still think that he's worth getting on the field for one or two series every game, regardless of how Skylar Thompson is playing? I don't know. But Coach Snyder has been more complimentary of Skylar the past few weeks. He even said earlier this week that he thought Skylar was coming into his own. And I think he's impressed with the way Skylar's been putting his body out there as a runner. He's been scrambling. Last week against Oklahoma State, he dove for the pylon against two defenders.
Right.
And that's something he really wasn't doing earlier in the season. He was doing a lot more sliding and just not fighting for yards. And that's not something Bill Snyder likes. So I think he's taken some steps in that direction where maybe he has opened up and trusted him a little bit more.
That long touchdown run he had against Baylor was one of his better plays of the year. That was impressive.
Yeah,
50 plus yards. Yeah. No, that was for me. That's kind of when it's when it's kind of changed for him. I know they didn't win the game, but I just thought that he got confidence from that. The offense found confidence in him, and he just seems to be a different guy since then.
Yeah. So he'll try to keep that going this week, and we'll keep the podcast going next week as well, and hopefully talk a little bit more basketball. There you go. So, all right, Blair. Thanks as always. We'll see you soon.
Okay, Kellis. Take care.